saying the board is rushing the decision and not giving the closings enough consideration.
I think it was done in an underhanded, inconsiderate fashion to have our teachers open up the newspaper on Tuesday morning and find out that their jobs were ending at the end of this year. Our principal found out the day before. Some of our kids would have to walk up to 1.5 miles to the various schools when you can go under the underpass or walk no more than several blocks to get to a neighborhood school. Close our neighborhood school this year. Whose neighborhood school will they close next time?
It was almost as if Superintendent Art Johnson was tuned into this rally, as less than 1/2 hour later he announced that he will ask the board Monday night to immediately close the schools in question.
I will recommend to the Rockford Board of Education on Monday evening that no action be taken on the proposals which were presented on March 17th in respect to operating plans for 1980-81. However, a specific recommendation will be made to the Rockford Board of Education detailing a 6-month review of the district's needs in regard to student housing, building maintenance, and repairs for the next 3 to 5 years.
If the board goes along with Johnson's plan, Rockford will have to ask the state for more time to develop a desegregation plan. School closings aren't the only thing that have some people upset with the school board. A proposal to off 150 teachers will come before the board Monday night. School officials say that declining enrollment and uncertainties over money from the state are the reasons for the proposal. But teacher representatives claim there's another reason.
Well, they usually come to the table and say, if you want more teachers, you'll have less money in your salaries, and that's just not valid. The negotiations tactic the board and the administration seems to like.
Are you going to fight it?
Definitely so. It's going to make negotiations very difficult. We're going to protest the firing of the teachers and try Monday night to stop the board from doing it.
That has not been a consideration of the district. The funding at both the local level and the federal level has had an impact. The number of people out on leave has had an impact. We are just trying to do some pre-planning for next fall.
Morgan claims layoffs come in years when a new contract has to be negotiated. When the last contract was negotiated in 1976, 414 teachers were laid off. School board members Robert Neiman and Carol Parker aren't getting the support of the Rockford Education Association in the upcoming election. Instead, the REA is endorsing newcomers Don and Robert Bates. Another candidate in the race is William Houghton. But while Rockford schools were closed for Energy Day today, Mary Conway reports the amount of energy saved may be questionable.
There is no question that closing schools does save some energy, but not all schools were closed completely today. Administrative staffs of all 5 high schools were supposed to work despite Energy Day, which meant lights had to be on and offices had to be heated. The whole idea of Energy Day is to reduce the heat in the buildings to about 50 degrees and turn off the electricity. Well, at Auburn High School today, I found the lights on in the corridors and the temperature in the main office was 75 degrees, 73 degrees in the empty teacher's lounge, and 68 degrees in the empty classroom. Principal John Seedoff declined comment, so I asked the Director of Plant Operations if this is really saving energy.
Well, without having been there to see why the temperatures are what they are, I really can't give you a definitive answer to it. It depends on whether or not we're getting any solar gain on that portion of the building that you were in where the thermostat showed that temperature.
That happened this morning. I checked back with Bonagiro this afternoon, and he says the school engineer assured him that the heat was due to the sun and not because the thermostats were set too high. He did not explain why the lights were on. Mary Conway, Action News.
Congress may pass a bill that would phase out interest rate limits on savings accounts, revolutionizing banking as it now exists in the United States. But as Rick Price reports, the idea is not well liked by everyone.
At the heart of the bill is a proposal to decontrol the rates that banks and savings and loans can pay on regular passbook accounts. Currently, the banks pay 5.25% on the accounts. The savings and loans are 1/4% higher. If the bill is passed, interest rates would go up 1/4% within the next 18 months and 0.5% over the following 18-month period. Rates would then be allowed to increase by 0.5% a year thereafter until the 6-year period is up. There has been sentiment in favor of such reform for many years. But with discussion of the bill as close as next week, officers of some savings institutions are having second thoughts. The House could move on the Consumer Checking Account Equity Act of 1979 as early as next week. If it passes, it could profoundly change the nature of the thrift industry in America. Rick Price, Action News.
Prices closed lower in slow trading today on the New York Stock Exchange as investors showed concern about inflation and the rising interest rates. The Ayatollah Khomeini has made his most sweeping policy statement since toppling. In a fiery speech, Khomeini urged Iranians to spread their revolution abroad and fight the United States and the Soviet Union with equal zeal. But as Tom Fenton reports, the 50 Americans held hostage for 139 days were not mentioned.
In a New Year's communique read by his son Ahmed, Ayatollah Khomeini called for a return to law and order in post-revolutionary Iran. The ailing leader said discipline must be imposed on Iran's demoralized armed forces. It was a sharp departure from Khomeini's customarily radical declarations and appeared to signal a change in his domestic policy. It amounted to a strong endorsement of President Bani Sadr's moderate policies. Since his election, Bani Sadr has met with only limited success in his attempts to assert his authority and restore order to Iran. Bani Sadr's constant complaint is that his government has been weakened by what he calls unofficial power centers. Khomeini, however, made no mention of the most important of these unofficial power centers. There was nothing in his communique about the militants who still hold the hostages at the American embassy. This glaring omission suggests that even Khomeini made limits to what he can order the militants.
President Carter has sent one of his most to Panama to review differences surgery on the deposed Shah of Iran. Marvin Kalb reports.
Officials say White House Chief of Staff Hamilton Jordan is in Panama, principally to try to iron sharp differences that have arisen between the Shah's doctors and advisors and the Panamanian doctors who may operate on his spleen, possibly in the next few days. The Shah's aides describe the former monarch as very, very sick. They say they do not trust medical facilities in Panama, find the general environment there hostile. The Shah's aides are said to be raising the possibility that the Shah be allowed back into the U.S. for medical treatment. The Shah himself has not specifically asked for such permission, but it's clear the U.S. will do whatever it can to keep the Shah from coming back here. Officials refuse comment on whether they would actually let him in if it's really a case of life and death.
Campaigning in Connecticut today, George Bush stepped up his criticism of Carter's handling of the Iranian situation and specifically attacked the Hamilton-Jordan mission to Panama. Diane Sawyer has that story.
George Bush said President Carter is using a Georgia political operative to do a diplomat's job, which he says implies the White House is more concerned about political than policy repercussions. At the very least, Bush says Mr. Carter should explain just what Hamilton-Jordan is doing. In the past week, Bush has taken the lead among Republicans in criticizing the administration on Iran. He says the failure of the UN Commission proves the administration policy is a farce. He says the time has come to get tough, to break relations and institute economic sanctions. Bush said for months now the American people have supported the president on Iran out of patriotism alone. But now he said it's time for the president to come out of the Rose Garden and give some explanations if he expects that support to continue.
Bush also had some pessimistic words today regarding his GOP rival, John B. Anderson. During a campaign stop in Connecticut, Bush gave the Rockford congressman little chance of succeeding in his quest for the Republican nomination. As Bush put it, "I don't seriously think there's a way in the world the Republican convention will nominate John Anderson." But John B. also got in his licks today, accusing Bush of deliberately distorting Anderson's proposals and Ronald Reagan of abandoning his party after losing the 1976 nomination. Speaking in Hartford, Anderson said his two rivals demean the quality of the 1980 campaign by their recent attacks on his positions and party loyalties. Sue Mroz will tell us what the first weekend of spring will look like when we come back.
Our forecast for the first weekend of spring sounds as though it could have been written for the first weekend of winter. There is a possibility of snow moving into the Rockford area. Currently outside in Rockford, lots of stars shining. We're at 29 degrees. That's -2 on the Celsius scale. The barometer's been rising steadily now, 30.11 inches, humidity 63%, northwesterly wind flow at 10 miles per hour. It has settled down considerably from the early show. Our high reading today, 43 at 3:10 this afternoon. Our low was 29, our current reading in Rockford. Normally we're at 45 for a high and 27 for a low. Well, Miami Beach, Florida, and all the sunbathers held out today against that cold air mass that's pushing its way off to the east coast. 90 degrees, just a real scorcher in Miami Beach this afternoon, but most of the country felt the effects of the latest cold air mass. Temperatures tumbling today from the 60s you saw earlier in the week, many 40s, 50s, and a few 60s. We will be cooling off as another air mass moves our way, another cold front. And besides bringing in, of course, the leading edge of the cold air mass, those cold fronts have been triggering quite a bit of thunderstorm activity, widespread rain, and widespread flooding. This is what's been happening down in the southeast. Mississippi has many areas in flood tonight. The thunderstorm activity was quite heavy. Last night, 8 tornadoes were reported throughout the daytime, 6 of them in Alabama alone. Lots of heavy rainfall. The Tombigbee River was out. The Alabama River was overbanked. Lots of swollen creeks reported. The rain has now pushed its way to the northeast, as you can see on our satellite shot. Here's the system now. 5 inches of rain reported in portions of New York State. And the latest storm, now coming in from the west, is the one to concern us over the weekend. This low-pressure cell is quite deep this evening. The winds around it very strong, 50-mile-per-hour gusts throughout New York State. They diminish to 30 to 40-mile-per-hour gusts as you move into the Ohio Valley. And, of course, it was windy for us this afternoon. Very deep pressure, 29.05 inches of mercury. Flooding conditions still in the southeast tonight. Coming for us right now, a ridge of high pressure extending all the way down from Minnesota. But what we're looking for, this low-pressure system moving in our direction. It's going to bring rain to the south of the Rockford area and most probably snow for us. It will depend, of course, on what time of day or night the system moves in. Mark Leather reports 30 degrees in Stillman Valley tonight. David Little says a matching 30 in Byron and another 30 from Martin, Dunn, and Dixon. Our forecast for tonight then, fair and cold, 23 degrees for Saturday. We'll start out with a little bit of sun, but the clouds will increase throughout the day. There is a possibility of snow tomorrow evening, 45 for a high, 28 for a low. Then on Sunday, once again, possibility of some snow. And they're saying this system is a snow and a rain maker, so we could go either
those
way.
Temperatures aren't too bad, though.
Not too bad.
Not too bad. Thanks, Sue. Have a super weekend.
You too.
Steve Sizer will have tournament highlights, past and present, when we come back. Stay with us.
Hi, everybody. This is a great weekend for basketball fans in Illinois, Wisconsin, and the whole United States, for that matter. State tournaments are in full swing in both the Badger State and Illinois. Let's check up and see what's happened up to now. In games this afternoon, quarterfinals in the IHSA basketball tournament, Aurora West beat Peoria Richwoods 44-43. It was Effingham beating LaSalle 68-56. We'll have highlights in that game in just a little bit. In games tonight, Lincoln over Gordon Tech 66-47. Manly beat Downers Grove South 55-54. So it's Manly and Lincoln and Effingham and Aurora West in the semifinals tomorrow morning beginning at 11. In Wisconsin tonight, in Class A action, it was Janesville Craig beating Madison La Follette 60-52. Over in Class B in a game this afternoon, Elkhorn over Spooner 51-50. Tonight it was Watoma over Viroqua 61-51. In Class C, Edgar over South Shore 80-61, and Kohler beat Altoona 73-60. That Effingham De La Salle game this afternoon was a wild one. Effingham trailed 25-16 at the half, but gained a tie when Mitch Arnold hit this shot in the fourth quarter. De La Salle was down by 7 later in the fourth quarter until Mike Williams cut that lead to 51-46 with this hoop right here. Williams fouled out of the game with 15 points. Arnold was just too hot to be stopped for Effingham, though. He finished with 39 points to lead the game and the Flaming Hearts as well. Effingham iced the game when 7'2" center Uwe Blopp dunked this breakaway shot. He's the tallest player ever to play in the state tournament. A 68-56 final, and they'll meet Aurora next. I learned tonight that the administration at Rockford College may lose a large contribution for next year. Alumni Relations Director Helen Erickson received this letter from Vice President James Atwater of the Lincoln First Bank in Rockford, New York today. In the letter, he said that certain clients of his who have been significant contributors to Rockford College in the past have decided against donating around $75,000 to the school. The reason for the decision was what the contributors called the uncertainty of surrounding the future of sports and the sports information program at Rockford College. The professional SID is being fired and being replaced by student workers. The administration had no comment on the letter when I asked them about it tonight. However, College Vice President Vic Peterson may have something to say tomorrow when he returns to town. Peterson is in charge of fundraising at Rockford College. Each year, the state basketball tournament seems to get better and better, but while the action is fierce, let's look back at one of those classic championship games during the 60s. 1962 was the year of one of the best IHSA basketball championship games of all time. Chicago Carver with stars like Cassie Russell and Joe Allen against a smaller but physical Decatur High School team. Decatur's Runnin' Reds fell behind 13-2 in the first quarter, but they made an unbelievable comeback and took a 38-32 lead in the third quarter. Decatur's mainstay was number 51, the team's center at 6'3", and leading scorer averaging 20 points a game. That man is now the head batsman, Barnes.
Game in 62.
I think it's just the intenseness of the game itself. I believe it took me quite a few moments to wind down, and the entire team. We were really determined. In fact, we learned afterwards supposedly the Carver team was picked to win, and the cameras and everything was set up in their locker room beforehand, but in our minds we didn't feel that they were better than us at all.
The score was tied at 48 with about a minute left to play. Decatur stole the ball and Barnes was fouled with about 6 seconds left to play. He was not having a great day on his shoulders.
6 seconds left. Here it goes.
Carver did call a timeout simply to build up the drama in my mind, but I wasn't really worried because I knew I would make 1 out of 2 at least, which as it turned out, I really wanted to make the 2 shots, but it didn't happen.
So Decatur won the state basketball championship 49-48.
That this was one of the greatest championship games of all time, to which we will all concur. Congratulations, Decatur Reds.
That was the last year that held in the Huff Gym. A little bit more about the things that have been going on at Rockford College in the past 24 hours, and Kelly Daly should have that tomorrow night.
Those contributions could spell some bad news for him.
$75,000 is one heck of a lot of money.
Okay, thanks, Steve. There's a man in North Fort Myers, Florida, who says he's related to a legend, and that's next. We want you to meet Frog Smith. He says he's the great-grandson-in-law of Dan Tucker, and you know Dan, but in southern Florida, Frog's as much of a legend as the old woodsman himself.
Frog Smith sings, and his son George fiddles, the song about the legendary backwoodsman Old Dan Tucker.
Old Dan Tucker, a lot of people think Old Dan Tucker was a myth, see.
That's all.
They have a song about it. Well, Old Dan Tucker's son homesteaded 4 miles west of Moultrie, Georgia, in Colquitt County before the Civil War.
Dan Tucker was a real man.
Oh, a real man, yes, sir. He's an old fisherman and fiddler. Enjoyed dancing.
Frog Smith, in other words, is Old Dan Tucker's great-great-grandson-in-law. And since Dan Tucker went to his reward, the nearest thing to a legend around here is Frog Smith himself. I found out all the tall tales about Frog Smith are true. How'd you support your family?
Frog hunting. That's why I turned to frog hunting.
And they called you Frog?
They named me Frog. I didn't like the name, neither did my wife. My wife at that time. She didn't like the name, but both the fellows that named me that were bigger than I was, so I had to wear it anyway.
100 years from now, they'll still be telling Frog Smith stories around here.
Frog Smith. and you're still trying to figure out who Dan Tucker was, aren't you? Stay tuned. Coming up on The Late Show, a super movie, Jane Fonda starring in They Shoot Horses, Don't They? If you haven't seen it, please stay tuned. For Sue and Steve, I'm Rick Moore. Good night.